Welcome to ViviTalks. I'm Vivienne Aerts. Join me in celebrating 100 talented female musicians from my last album, Typuhthâng, empowering female cacao farmers in Congo's Virunga State Park and restoring the rainforest. Delve into the musical journeys, creative processes, and unique perspectives of these talented women that were involved in the making of this album. Today I'm talking with Zahili Zamora, Cuban bass player and arranger for my song, What Will It Be from Typuhthâng. Listen to our conversation as we talk about her Cuban roots, her connection to performance anxiety, and her experiences as a woman in Cuban music. Zahili is a pianist, composer, and arranger who feels most defined by her Cuban heritage and her status as a citizen of the world. She is always guided by her passion to connect with others through music and driven by the need to grow as an artist and as a human being. She aspires to inspire, to be a messenger of a journey that is not only her own, but one that deeply resonates within others. Welcome to my official podcast, ViviTalks. It's such a pleasure to have you, Zahili. We know each other for a while, and you're not only an amazing human being and a piano player, and I mean, you even sing. And for the album, it's been such a pleasure that you contributed your wonderful thoughts on my song and made this super cool arrangement for big band, for Cuban style bolero. And the song is called What Will We Be? So it's a pleasure to have you here, and I love to introduce you to whoever my audience is, and so we can promote you and your stuff.
Thank you. My name is Zahili Zamora. I am Cuban, 100% Cuban, born and raised. A pianist, composer, exactly as you said, arranger. Been here in Boston for the past 10 years, which is pretty much about the time that I've known you. And I left Cuba about almost 22 years ago, and it's been a journey that took me all the way to Boston, and I've settled my roots here, which feels great. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it was great to be part of your project. It was also a learning experience, and to know about all the things that you are advocating for. So thank you so much for inviting me and for making me a part of it.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. I love to learn more about your background. So you grew up in Cuba, you took piano lessons like regular, and how did you eventually get all the way over here? What was that journey like?
Long story short, so I come from I would say, musical family. My mom's dad, my grandfather on my mother's side, he was a singer that gig quite often in a big band in my town, and it was called the Orquesta America. And I wasn't even born, or was simply too little to remember a lot. But I know that he was the one that instilled the music genes into, not my mom. Funny enough, my mom did not decide for music, but all of my mom's siblings did study music. So I grew up, with a piano in my living room that immediately made me really curious. So at the age of 3, I already started reaching up to the piano and taking melodies of all the cartoons that I was here, watching on TV, all the themes from the cartoons. I was playing those melodies by ear. And my grandmother, my mom's mom, saw this, and she was like, okay, no, I got to take her to the music school. Thankfully, one of the things that is good about Cuba is that the educating system is free. So that was a no-brainer. I was 6 years old. I went, I did my, that first test that they give you just to make sure whether you're apt for music or not. And that started the whole music journey, you know. But in part, my grandmother is responsible because she was the one that was observing what I was doing. And yeah, I did. I'm formally brought up in classical music. And to this day, it's, you know, I feel it in my bones. It's like I need to be playing something classical. And I do some classical compositions, you know, not mixed with jazz, because it's really instilled in me and I love it. Um, but, you know, I had no idea that this was going to be my journey. For a moment, I thought I was going to be a concert pianist because that's how hard I was, how immersed I was in classical music. But, you know, things started to change. I started to burn out. I was practicing like 10 hours a day and doing competitions and festivals. And at some point, I wanted to take a different turn. So in my late teens, I started performing with Cuban bands. And at the time, female Cuban bands were a boom in Cuba. So I started doing this. I started traveling outside of Cuba, which was a novelty. That's something also that has to do with the system. Not everybody gets to get out of the country, even for like, you know, touring or something like that. So it was great. And I was super young. So enjoying that life. And, you know, a few years later with that same band, we all decided to stay in Canada. So that sort of started a second chapter in my musical life because we were all together. So you can imagine this. It was 9 women, 2 men, and we're like starting a new life in Canada, all living together in the same house. You know, but fast forward, priorities also changed. You know, 6 years later, some started getting married, having kids, and the band wasn't a priority. So the band sort of split up. And that brought up an opportunity for me to go and perform in Southeast Asia. And I was a little scared at first because, you know, I was already in Canada, already away from home. And then now I got this opportunity to go to Southeast Asia. So I gave it a thought and decided to just give it a try. And a 3-month contract became a 6-year stay in Southeast Asia. I started going from contract to contract. And that really taught me a lot. That was the opportunity to learn all the classics of American music. Because when I was in Canada, you know, aside from Cuban music, I started mingling with other people, you know, it's so multicultural that I already started learning music of other countries. But Macau, which is where I spent the majority of the time, it was an opportunity to learn, you know, funk and Motown and, you know, the music of Ella Fitzgerald and Earth, Wind and Fire, and that including all of the current music of the time, which we had to perform. So it was a top 40 band. I did that for 6 years. And my favorite thing was always the first set because it was a jazz set. Which, funny enough, I did not know I was playing jazz, you know. The whole, you know, I think back to it and I realize that I always gravitated toward jazz. And I had already even transcribed a few solos without knowing that that's what I was doing. It was just out of pure impulse. I was liking things that I was hearing and I just wanted to play them. And I think that sort of brought sounds to my head, but I had no idea. If you asked me what chord are you playing, at that time I had no clue what I was playing. So I think it started to grow in me. That first set, I really, really wanted to dig in. And I was fortunate to play with a few Berkeley students or grads, actually. And they said, well, if you want to pursue jazz, maybe Berkeley is your school. And that's really what prompted me to come to Berkeley, audition, and then start my studies here. So you can say that, it took 15 years for me in my career as a musician to really find where I felt like I was me and happy and in a constant sense of discovery and reconnecting with myself, finding my own roots. So now now I'm this piano player that, obviously I try to be as versatile as I can, but identify as an Afro-Cuban, style piano player primarily.
What a journey. That's mind blowing. Well, I'm glad you made it to Boston because otherwise we never would have met. And
Oh my
so
gosh, yes,
you're
exactly.
a wonderful
Both of
pianist.
us.
Yes. Yeah. So you did undergrad and then you joined the master pro and after your undergrad you started teaching at Berkeley, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And you
yeah.
did that for several years, and then you decided to do this master program. And I want to hear more about your master program because you had this fascinating story about it and this
Yes,
project that I really want you to share with whoever
yes.
is on here.
So, when I left Cuba, I had only done my high school, but I've always been, I think maybe I've had this thing of being a student, a really good one, I really love to study and I love to learn. So that itch of really doing my undergrad studies was really there. I wanted to complete my undergrad studies, which is one of the reasons why I came to Berkeley, further my studies in jazz and get my diploma.
What year was that?
um, I came in 2013.
Yeah, I
I
came in
came in,
2000.
yes, there you go. That's why I came in 2013. And so I finally, fulfill my undergrad studies and my undergrad degree in 2017, a degree on performance and jazz composition, and it was great. It was great. Um, and I needed a break, obviously, like we all do after college. So I started performing, but I've always liked this idea of teaching, and I was already doing a few things in private schools around Boston. And I reached out to the at that time the intern chair of the department, Dave Lemina, and I just told him that I wanted to try out the 5-week program.
Mm.
And from the 5-week program, I was asked to do the 1-week intensive, and I actually did a workshop with Berkeley's City Music, the City Music program in Nashville. So I think those little things were sort of auditions, that eventually gave me the opportunity to start teaching here. I started in 2019. Since now I'm going into 5 years, which is crazy. Time flies. But once again, the eternal student, so I knew that I wanted to get my master's degree, and I just wanted I just love the opportunity to be in a school setting, for lack of better words, where you're around other people learning and challenging yourself. I feel like there's always this thing where you reach, and then you stay. And specifically for me, when I need that next step, I always look for this sort of school environment, because it keeps me motivated. So that started the journey of like, okay, now I have to develop like a thesis, and what am I gonna do it about? And the Global Jazz Institute is this place that, it's a 1-year program as opposed to 2 years. And it's, the focus is that you prepare a thesis that has to do with music for social change, right? Music as an instrument for social change. So that's already something that makes you think twice, like really, what can I do? And I love this, something that you're thinking, okay, what can I do with my music that is going to cause an impact in society one way or another? How can I make a difference, Um, and that takes even like the stress of performing for your own self. It's like now you're doing this offering. And digging in, I realized that I could have, maybe go into music performance anxiety. Um, I have been going to therapy sessions for about 3 years when I started my master's degree. And I did not go because of music, obviously, but I started realizing that there was a big connection. Me going on stage and feeling certain, emotions and body sensations and things that I was going through that I needed to work on in my regular life. It was very connected. So it felt just right to continue to investigate even more. I did not even know the whole terminology of music performance anxiety. So, long story short, that's what I developed, a thesis on music performance anxiety, which, was a moment of me, an opportunity for me to investigate about what is music performance anxiety, because there's different opinions about whether it is a thing or not. And everything that I investigated, I sort of turned it to myself and I try to analyze, aspects of my personality that matched the research from the books that I was reading. And then, as part of the master's program at the Global Jazz Institute, you end up with an album that is based on your research. So it was great to investigate about music performance anxiety, check out those things, kind of look at myself and match sort of, every single one of those subjects to what I was going through, and then write music about it, right? I felt really vulnerable doing it. In fact, I still feel it, like talking to you right now, I feel like I'm sort of, talking about a secret that I'm not supposed to talk about, because the whole idea of performance anxiety, most people just go, oh, just go and practice. Oh, you just, oh, just get it over with, So there's this thing over the surface that people just think is not that big of a deal. And then there's layers below that have to do with social aspect, cultural aspects, how you, grew up, who you grew up with, what mentors do you have, what traumas do you go through, da 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 da. So the beauty about that, when I was thinking that I was doing something kind of silly and just personal, it turned out that when I presented my thesis, a lot of people came out and expressed that they were going through something similar. So that actually is what motivated me to go ahead and create a project further, to further that, because it seems like there's so many people going through that. I question, well, what if I come up with a workshop where I can share what I learned, and then I bring in my coach, my therapist, who, she was quite instrumental. And then I talked to people that have inspired me in my process of, feeling better and more confident at the piano, such as yourself. So right now I'm in the process of developing and releasing a 5-day workshop that is going to be for, in this case, I want to start with piano players, because we have that commonality, but eventually it'll be absolutely anybody with an instrument feeling this same way. But it's going to be a 5-day workshop for piano players that are struggling with some form of performance anxiety. It's going to go from 10 o'clock in the morning until 4 o'clock. and we're just gonna dive in. It's gonna include, presentations by myself, discoveries in psychology and neuroscience, exercises on practice, meditations. They're gonna play for each other, obviously. And then we have you as a guest bringing your expertise. And yes, and obviously my coach is also going to be there just in case there is a trigger and somebody needs to be, assisted in a way that I'm not qualified for. She's going to be there for.
Yeah, I think it's such a wonderful thing you're doing because as we found out, right, I mean, your work now is so closely related, and I'm so excited to start collaborating because it's so necessary. So many people don't feel comfortable in their own bodies, and then that results into or having thoughts, and that gets into the way of the flow of the music. And yeah, we need to address this.
Yeah, I mean, it's overwhelming to think when I came out with this, I had no idea how many people were going through the same. And, research talks about it, whomever you least think that is going through that is going through that at a high level. But yeah, it's definitely, performing. People look at us on stage and we're giving it all, and they come to feel better, they come to listen to music, and people really have no idea all of the things that go, in preparation to a concert. You have to go and do your rehearsals, you got to learn your music, you got to feel confident, you got to like really understand the message that you want to, bring through in your concert. And there's a lot of pressure in that. And I come from the classical world too, which, is that kind of world in which you play what it is. No note can be out of place, no articulation, no dynamic can be out of place. And it's highly competitive as well. So for me specifically, it's something that came built up from all the pressures of classical music. And that sort of transferred to this. But then, like you're saying, you start not feeling comfortable in your own body, you start getting in your head, and then in a way the message is lost because then you're just ruminating, you're like here and you're not able to connect to the music. And yeah, it happens. I see it in my students, I see it in professionals. So if anything, I'm just hoping that anything that we have to offer during those 5 days, people are going to leave with at least one tool that connects with them, that whenever they feel a certain way, they can remember they have that available to them so that it's easier,
Right. Yeah. Earlier you spoke about music as a means of survival. You were describing how that pressure really got to you. Can you elaborate a little more on that and how you overcame it?
Well, here's the one thing. Music, I had to analyze a lot of things in my past in order to, really come to terms as to why was I going through what I was going through, like I said before, I used to practice 10 hours a day. That was my commitment to myself, I was 12, 13, 14. Nobody told me to be that way. But if my 10 hours were not completed, I would just go and practice overnight, and finish my 10 hours. So how is it possible that even with this amount of practice, if I had a concert, there was no guarantees, I could space out, I could, So, a few things with music for me specifically had to do with, survival because of where I come from. Music was a way out, not just out of the country, but there's such limited resources in my country, as beautiful as it is, in order to advance in a career. Once I made the decision that it was going to be music, that that was a hard decision to, for Cuba specifically. So there were steps that whether I made it or not, that was my course, So I had to make it. It was always that thing, I have to make it. If I don't make it, I'm not gonna survive. If I don't make it, I'm not gonna survive. That had to do with me moving from my town to Havana, which was something that was illegal at the time when I did it. And I did it because I wanted to advance in my career. And it was that thing, if I don't get to this school now, I have to go back to my town and be something else. I don't even have an idea what that might be.
Why was it illegal to move?
It's just
The law is such that you cannot.
It's just,
Or were you too young, maybe?
At a certain time in Cuba, I think it had to do with census and a lot of people moving to the capital city. And at some point, that was not, I cannot explain it to you because yes, I was young, but I know that I did it under circumstances in which this was not an easy thing to do. And it had nothing to do with just like moving. It was beyond that, So from a very early age, this whole idea of like, I'm doing this because of music, and if I don't make it, oops, was in me. It was in my psychic, So yeah, and eventually I left the country, and there was all of these decisions in which music was at the forefront, and it was about you deliver and you make it. You don't deliver, you don't make it. So it's, when I talk about survival, that's the one part about music for me that then I needed to make peace with, because once I got to Boston, I'm in a place in which there's no way back, in the sense of I can only grow, from absolutely every opportunity that I'm given. But there was that pressure of like, it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen. It's gotta be this way, or else, something bad is gonna happen. So that was the part for me that I needed to work with, and just take myself off the past and put myself more in the present. Yeah.
Beautiful. I'd love to know a little bit about your writing. What's your creative process? How do you approach composing and producing?
Nice. So for me, every single thing I've written, absolutely everything, has always been based on life experiences. I still have not been in a situation in which I have to write for other people. I've had to arrange a lot of music for other people, like yourself. But the music comes already to me, and then I just, sort of develop it and put my own touch to it. But for myself, every time I write, I just need to get to the piano. It's a way of healing for me. It's a way of, staying with my emotions. So it's usually a melody that comes in. Other times is just harmony, because, harmony is really powerful. So, and sometimes it's both, coming at the same time. It takes me a while too, because there's a perfectionist in me. So I have it, I let it rest, I come back, I fix one note, I let it rest, I come back, I delete the whole section, come back with a new section. I usually like to, I love this idea of mentors, so I always like to bring it to one of my mentors and present it and see how they, to get their opinions and ideas. And then I go back to it. So yeah, it's usually weeks and months in the process. And and is highly, highly, highly motivated by personal experience as well.
Beautiful. I love to hear more about you and women in music. Have you obviously my album is full of them. So yeah, have you faced any stereotypes or biases, and how do we change them?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question because, like I said before, when I decided that I was going to take a break from classical music and start popular music, it was female bands, funny enough. And at some point, I've compared female bands in Cuba as Starbucks in the US. How many Starbucks you see in the US? That's how many female bands we had in Cuba at some point, It was that much. It was everywhere.
That's amazing.
That was and high caliber, high quality, incredibly competitive, big deal. So it's interesting because in that sense, I wouldn't say I come from a place in which women are not at the forefront. I actually, at least in the time that I was living in Cuba, I started playing popular music because I saw it all over the place by women, and that, the part that, for Cuba, the part that I needed to understand later, and it took me actually leaving to realizing what was going on, is the whole idea of the sex appeal, So in order to be in a female band, we needed to dress in sexy clothing, and there was no just doing it at the piano. There was the performance aspect of it, which meant we had to smile all the time, and we had to, so it was dance, smile, playing, dancing. It was all together. But this included very, very sexy clothing, And we come from a culture that's just what it is. You don't even question it because that's just the nature of the culture. But once I left, I was like, wow, that's actually quite a lot, So if I have to say that I faced any challenges having to do with being a woman in music in Cuba, I'm a little conflicted because in my own perspective, no, I wouldn't say that. I was inspired by women, therefore I joined a women band. So it was the other thing that was like out of my comfort zone that I had to instill in me, putting a short or a super short skirt or, smiling to the crowd, which now comes out naturally. But back then I was like, no. So
you did feel objectified, but you did not quite realize that until later.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And, there's things about how Cuban women are perceived in the world, because we come from a world that it's heavy. People are surviving all the time, So traveling outside of Cuba in a female band, dressing this way, and having men coming to us was very uncomfortable, to say the least. But that also I don't think that has anything to do with like music, women in the music field,
Right.
It was another issue. That was another issue. I have to say I'm fortunate in certain ways because I have not had to deal with some of those things. Yet it took a little bit of gaining awareness for me to realize that, yes, there were some issues. I've been told I play like a man. And that is a compliment. you know, and I have taken that as a compliment when my eyes were, you know, when I was this way, for me to be told that I play like a man, whoa, that's a compliment. Thank you, you know. And then you wake up to that and you're like, wait a minute, you know, little things, subtleties that, you know, like you have to dig so much and like stay so aware to realize, wow, there's actually something going on in here, right? Uh, so things like that, you know, I've been, you know, in situations talking with other women that tell me I'd rather playing with men, or if I have a woman playing with me, I'm always looking to see if she's really good. But if it's a man, I don't question it. So I've received those comments. It hasn't been my situation, you know. I've been open to collaborate, you know, and open to hear what anybody has to offer. I realize this is a bigger issue here in the US, no doubt.
Yeah.
It's a bigger issue. So it's taken me
Well, and not
just
just
really,
with gender, right?
yes, yes, just staying aware, you know. I'm still working super hard on it. Just to, now that I'm here, present a music that is inclusive and music that inspires. You know, I love the idea of inspiring younger generations. You know, if we come from this place where now it's an issue and women need that, you know, sense of community, and younger females need to look up to somebody in order to even come up with the idea of being a musician, you know.
Right.
If anything, I want to be, you know, there and be an instrument for that younger generation and making a difference one way or another.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your teaching. What advice would you give, or what's your approach in teaching?
That's a good question. I I hate hierarchy. Obviously, I'm a teacher and I need to tell you what to do. But it's, you know,
Tough love.
but not necessarily how I teach. You know,
Yeah.
I love having my students come in, and I try to open an opportunity for them to be themselves, you know. Since I'm working on this idea of like music performance anxiety, I am big on psychology. If I weren't a musician, I think that would have been my path. Because I just like observing, you know, body language. How are you feeling? How is that note coming out? Are you confident? And I try to teach from that perspective, you know. We talk a lot about ways to practice so that when you're going to perform, you feel more confident. It's more conversation, really being in a classroom with me, where we're playing for each other, but we're more conversing than me telling you, you got to do this, and this is where you go. And truly not my personality at all, but I enjoy it, and I think it's going really well. You know, the moment I see a student that comes back and comes back and comes back, and the last time I see that student is because they have to graduate, then I know I'm making a difference. So,
Right. Yeah. Awesome. What's coming up? What is
yes.
coming up musically?
Yeah.
I mean, we already heard about your endeavors with new courses and offerings for the mental aspect, but what's
Yes.
coming up musically for you? Aren't you gonna record your new album?
Yes, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. So those are the compositions that came out from the thesis, which, you know, I already have a demo, and I just want to dive in a little deeper, maybe compose 2 more tunes regarding that same aspect of music performance anxiety. So it's based on that. Yeah, right now we're just rehearsing, and I have Alay Malay who's going to produce the album,
And it's
and
with strings as well, right? What's the band?
the band is going to be drums, percussion, myself on piano, bass. There's going to be voice. It's possible there's going to be strings. I'm still deciding. There might be like 1 or 2 solo piano tunes in there. But yeah, I'm excited. That's going to happen in May. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it was a pleasure to have you.
Oh my gosh, this was a lot.
Oh, people can always listen it 2 times.
Right.
Yes, or 3 times. Yes, I recommend everybody to check out the links. There will be links in the descriptions to your website and your projects. And such a pleasure to have you. And we'll talk soon.
I'm truly honored, Vivienne. Thank you so much. This you're doing, once again, it just adds up to the pool of empowering each other and being here for each other. And I also have, great admiration for you. And it's great to have been, near you and also seeing your growth and all the stuff that you're doing. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being in my team. I cannot wait, for you to be part of this collaboration and what you're going to bring to the table. So yeah, more than honored. Thank you so much.
As I conclude this episode of ViviTalks, I want to express my sincere gratitude for joining me in this musical journey. I hope you enjoyed exploring the stories and experiences of the incredible female musicians on my album. To stay updated on our latest episodes, subscribe to ViviTalks on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on social media through Vivienne, and please check out my album Typuhthâng, a musical exchange featuring 100 female musicians to empower female cacao farmers of Virunga State Park in Congo. It's about more than just music. It's about making a positive impact in the world. Your support is part of that journey, so thank you once again for tuning in. Until next time, keep celebrating the power of music, and let's continue to amplify the voices of remarkable women in the industry. Stay inspired, stay empowered, and keep the music flowing. With love and gratitude. Till soon.